Thanks for joining us. We're going to switch our conversation now. We're going to talk something very important, and to let you understand how important it is. The World Health Organization says there are 322 million people worldwide living with it, and in Nigeria alone, the WHO is ranking Nigeria with 15.1 suicides per 100,000 people. In Nigeria. If that doesn't jolt you, I don't know what else. We were talking depression and dealing with it as a mental health issue. I have here with me the founder of Joy Inc., Chude Jideonwo. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
Long time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well done.
Thank you.
Joy Inc. is very... Let's quickly talk about Joy Inc. now, because a lot of people tend to ask, what is it exactly?
Yeah.
And it sounds like we know the soap, Joy. And we also know joy as a thing you experience. But what exactly are you trying to push here?
We live in an age where, and we were just talking about social media and how it robs professionals in the media of the ability to just be human, essentially. And we live in an age where everything is fast and accelerated, and those things that anchor us to our best selves, so to speak, are in misalignment. You wake up in the morning, and before you can pay attention to yourself and your body, you have 10 voices in your head, otherwise known as Instagram, and all of that. So in this case, it's very easy to lose connection with your heart, your mind, and your spirit. And we see all of those things happening in the kinds of mind and emotional diseases that we are facing. And so Joy Inc. is, how do you remind people through storytelling about the things that connect them to their best selves? That's essentially
things that should matter.
Things that should matter. How do you remind them? Because it is difficult to remember. Life is so fast that I think people take it for granted that life has always been this fast. Life was not this fast even in the century that just passed 18 years ago. You know, this change is radical. It's so
much is happening.
It's so much, and people are not aware of it because they are born into it or they are inside of it. And it's the job of storytellers to remind people of what matters and how they can reconnect to what matters. And that, beyond depression and anxiety, is what Joy Inc. is about. Yeah,
great. Which is also, that ties in, of course, to where you just said, you know, depression and mental wellness as a whole now. And I was reading the study here, and it says Nigeria is ranked 10th in Africa. People see those figures like that and they don't believe it. Who's depressed in Nigeria? I better get over it, or who commits suicide anyways. Even though with social media now, we've started seeing a lot more of how frequent it is. Do we believe these figures, and what could be a reason why?
So this is why storytellers are as important as scientists and researchers, because people can be hit with numbers all day and they won't pay attention until they see stories. And so the fact that we have more anecdotal suicides doesn't mean that suicide is any less frightening. It had been frightening even before social media began to capture it. So the hope is that now that people are seeing this story, so we're looking for silver lining in these tragedies, which is now people are seeing dramatic enunciations of this crisis, then maybe they will pay attention. But the truth is that yesterday at Auntie Betty Rabo's book launch, you did something that was really remarkable. You said if anybody is as courageous as Auntie Betty to raise up their hands. And I think at least a quarter of the room, and these were highly accomplished people, glittering young celebrities, raised up their hands, including me, that we faced depression at some point in our lives. These are not failures by any chance. These were not people whose stars have dimmed by any chance. We're not talking about, these are current wealthy people and celebrities.
Who run companies.
Who run businesses, who are paid in 6-7 figures to appear at events. So it is a crisis. It's a real crisis. It's a compounding crisis, which means that I remind people that Nigeria's most official depression figures from WHO were as of 2015. Now, as of 2015, the WHO had indicated that by 2020, depression will be the leading cause of disability worldwide. And it arrived 2 years early. So by last year, depression became the leading cause of disability worldwide. So if at that time, the research by Professor Oye Gureje of University of Ibadan, who is the foremost authority when it comes to research on depression in Nigeria, said there were 7 million people who were fully depressed, met all the criteria of depression. That means by now, that number should have at least doubled. At least, based on, you look at population indices, you look at the lack of treatment, including self-help strategies. So it is a crisis. And the beautiful thing about it is that it's a crisis that doesn't need money to solve. So if we can stop it in its tracks, then we will not be having to deal with so many suicides.
So that's stopping in the tracks now is what I'm very interested in, before we even get to sort of healing or solutions now. how do we stop it? Because there's also a myth that more successful people sometimes deal with it more, or suffer it more.
Yeah, people always,
because poor people are anyway. Wait till consign me, you know. Is that also a fact?
When I teach my masterclass, I always tell people, people always like to say, all these celebrities, they are all living fake lives. They have depression. And I'm like, some of them have depression. Some of them are living fake lives. But a lot of them are living great lives, buying houses. They're happy with their wives and children, and they're very okay. So we don't want to move from one extreme to the next extreme. Depression can affect anyone. Now, a storyteller's reading of the data, because again, I haven't seen any data that specifically tracks the difference between popular, successful people and not popular, successful people. What the research seems to show is that when it comes to creative industries, people are at risk at the top. Because at that time, they're dealing with huge pressures of fame, huge pressures of identity, etc. But when you are a professional, the pressure is below. Because at that time, you're trying to make more money, you're trying to, so there's something there that's interesting. But again, it can affect anyone, So it has nothing to do with being wealthy or not being wealthy. We're not supposed to eschew wealth. We're not supposed to boast with poverty so that we can say other people have wealth and then we have happiness. So the thing about depression that's so remarkable, it's that it is difference agnostic. It can hit anybody, anywhere at any time. The happiest person who loses a child is at risk of both situational depression, which is a milder form, major depressive episodes, which are the bigger forms, or even there's one, I forget the name, but it's one that lasts at least for 2 years, where you're just suffering a low-grade depression that doesn't go. It's just there. So anyone can suffer depression.
We're talking about stopping it in the tracks. And what sort of measures should we be taking? Because, prevention, they always say, is better than whatever cure you're trying to put out. So what sorts of things should we be doing as individuals, as a community?
The first one is a cultural shift, and that's, of course, going to be more difficult, but it's so necessary, which is people begin to normalize both depression and other mental health disorders. Because there's a conversation about depression that's making it seem as if other health disorders are still stigmatized. But all of them need to be brought on the table, need to be normalized, need to be talked about. People, celebrities, famous people, wealthy people, whoever has the courage to talk about it should begin to talk about it so people begin to normalize it. And then people need to begin to seek help. The good thing about it is that because people are not aware of the debilitating nature of this sickness, the resources that are presently available are not yet overwhelmed. So for instance, there's a Lagos State toll-free line. And that toll-free line has not yet been overwhelmed with calls. And that's because people are not yet sure whether what they have is a sickness or they are just being weak.
Or they're just sad.
They're just sad, yes.
Get over it.
Get over it, exactly. So the first thing is, if we have a cultural change, we have people who are more supportive of people who have depression, people who don't stigmatize or punish people who have depression, people who don't treat suicide victims, because they are victims, as weak people, as criminals, or as thieves. So those two things are important. The third thing and the most important way of doing this is for large-scale public health intervention. And that occurs in two ways. We need government, sadly, primarily, to take this problem seriously. And it isn't, because there are two conflicting reports. There's either one report that says there's one psychiatrist to 500,000 people in Nigeria, which is terrible until you remember there's only one psychiatrist to the entire population in Liberia. And some people say there's one psychiatrist to 1.5 million people in Nigeria, which is even worse. Now, there are psychologists, but the problem with psychology is that its range of motions in response to depression is limited because psychologists can't recommend drugs if you have an immediate crisis. So that's one problem. And we need to begin to encourage young people to study psychiatry and to begin to see a career path in psychiatry because they are more likely to understand the technology enabling causative effect, whatever, of depression. So that's the one thing. So this large-scale public health intervention will lead to that, and it's not available. The national mental health policy that Nigeria has is in 1990. It was made in 1990, when depression was not yet a significant global or national illness. It was updated. It wasn't overhauled. It was simply a few things were changed in 2005. So what we have now cannot effectively deal on any level with the compounding crisis that we're seeing across the world. Now, if government begins to take something seriously, like they took Ebola seriously, then citizens will begin to take it seriously. That's why government is sadly important. I wish government were not so important because we know how inefficient Nigerian governance is, but it is important. Now, there are also NGOs, and there are a number of them have begun to discover. Mentally Aware Nigeria, She Rights Women, especially, these are two prominent young people. She Rights Women just won Queen Elizabeth Young Leaders Award in the UK. So people need to begin to look at how to fund and elevate the work that they're doing. And I try to help them raise some money, 10 million naira, to set up a Joy Hub that's going to hopefully open in August. So if we are able to begin to do those things, both to raise awareness, because depression is ultimately costless to treat.
Yeah. The
most effective, there's been a meta-analysis of all the studies done on the effects of drugs, and they show that cognitive behavioral therapy and a reprogramming of the mind is often more effective than drugs for depression.
Yeah.
And CBT is ultimately self-help. That means that people can solve their own problems, but they need to learn the skills. The skills need to be culturally resonant. So the challenge is, how do we make people understand that we have a crisis that we can deal with speedily? And the only way to do that is, one, let it be culturally resonant, and two, massive public health intervention by government and civil society.